Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Hello, everyone. A famous story in the Abrahamic tradition is when Abraham was shown a dream in which he is sacrificing his firstborn son. He takes his son to a mountain, and just as he is about to slit his throat, an angel appears and tells him to sacrifice an animal instead. From this stems a lot of dialogue. Do religious people claim that whatever God commands is good? Which ties into the ancient Euthyphro dilemma as presented by Socrates, who said that is goodness something that God commands, or does something become good because God is commanding it? Because if goodness is something that God commands, then there's something outside of God that he is using to say what is good. And then religious people cannot claim that God is the grounding for their morality. But if goodness is simply what God commands, then this seems to go against our moral intuition that God can command something like sacrificing your firstborn son, and we just have to submit and say that that is good. I'd like to approach this argument from a right angle. First of all, this is not an issue only religious people have to deal with. This is a dilemma that everyone questioning morals will come across. Take a naturalistic view, for example. The only reason that a naturalist would have to believe that murder is wrong is because evolutionarily we are a tribal species, and if murder roamed free in our tribes, then we would not be able to survive nor reproduce. So if it is truly the case that we only believe that murder is wrong because of an evolutionary accident, well, we can imagine a world in which we evolved like lions, fighting and killing and maiming each other for mating rights or territorial advantage. So the question of why murder is actually wrong is a problem for everyone. First of all, it is important to consider that in at least Islamic scholarly tradition, the dream that Abraham was shown of sacrificing his firstborn is taken to be analogous, in that this firstborn son was going to make the temple in Mecca for Muslims or Jerusalem for the Jews and the Christians, and devote his entire life in the maintenance of that temple with his father Abraham. God asserts in the Quran that he does not command indecencies, as the polytheists of Mecca would force those coming to pilgrimage to come not wearing any clothing. And they said that God has ordered us to do this. God very angrily says that, no, I do not command indecencies. How dare you say that I would command something like that? A central ayah in the Quran for Muslims mentions that God commands justice, excellence, and spending on your close relatives, and prohibits that we do any indecent or shameful acts, and prohibits us from doing what is known to be wrong. The Arabic word used is munkar, what is known to be societally wrong, and also prohibits us from being rebelliously oppressive. So, in my view, the more important question is not what is good, as Socrates asked, though that is also a very interesting discussion, but how do we actually come to know what is good? The Quran has an answer for this, that God has put an innate knowledge inside us human beings, what is in alignment with God consciousness and what is corrupt. We all know that murdering is wrong. That is not what is under argument here. The nature of this knowledge is the domain of epistemology, but the existence of it cannot be questioned. So whether God commands something because it is good, or it is good because he commands it, has no bearing on our knowledge of what is actually good and bad. The knowledge of good and evil originates from God himself, as mentioned in the Quran. It is inspired to human beings. The how of this knowledge being in human beings is perhaps a question of neuroscience or anthropology or sociology. Why is it that all human beings have such an aversion to harm and suffering? Is it just because we don't like to suffer ourselves and we don't like to experience being harmed? Because if that's the case, then morality is quite self centered. We just assume if I don't like something, then the other person won't like it either. And in this way, it would just be up to an individual himself to decide what's right and wrong. That doesn't seem complete, because what if an individual or a group of individuals, as societies have in the past, believe that sacrificing your children to a pagan deity is a good thing to do? Or what if they believe that a certain ethnicity of people or a certain race of people are lesser and a threat, and therefore they should be exterminated. This would mean that morality is just contingent on what a group of people or an individual thinks. This has not gone well for societies in the past, whether they were polytheistic or atheistic, which is why perhaps religious people are right in claiming that the validation of their innate knowledge of right and wrong received from the Almighty is of value. Without having a non-human validation for this innate knowledge of good and evil that we all share, the aversion to harm and suffering, and the drive for justice and charity, human beings will simply seek either their own individual benefit or the benefit of the collective. My name is Ahmed Shoaib, a medical student at the University of Oxford. Thanks for watching.